Howard Taft was the 27th President of the United States and was actually Theodore Roosevelt's hand-picked successor, since Roosevelt wasn't sure he should run for what would essentially be a third term. Even though he was only elected once before, he served the majority of what would have been President McKinley's second term before that, and figured he might as well play it safe and find someone he was confident would continue his work instead. And, once again, that someone was Taft, and old Bill did a pretty good job of that. He was a trust buster, actually busting twice as many trusts as Roosevelt did. He used government power to help the common American, and even did a little trolling in Latin America. But the biggest problem between Bill and Ted was that Bill thought Ted went a little too far in foreign policy, use of government power, and especially in conservation. Roosevelt created massive nature reserves using literal hundreds of executive orders, and Bill thought that this wasn't something the president could just do without Congress's approval. So, he sold a bunch of it off to private owners. Like 3 million acres of it. And Roosevelt went mad. He made Taft out to be a traitor to the progressive movement and decided, to heck with it. I only served one term, I'm gonna run again. And he tried to unseat Taft as the Republican nominee in the upcoming election. But by then, the Republicans decided that they liked Taft's moderate progressivism better than what Roosevelt was offering. He did get a bit more radical in his views in the years he was out of office, while Taft showed the Republicans that progressivism could be done without extreme expansions of executive power. Not being one to be defeated so easily, Roosevelt decided, fine, I don't need the Republican Party. I'll make my own party with bulls and mooses. And he was defeated easily. And so was Taft. Roosevelt's third party split the Republican vote and allowed for the rise of the Dark One. Actually, Wilson wasn't that bad. Mr. Z made a whole video about it here if you want to check that out. And he absolutely, definitely, totally did not make me just say that. Totally. Still, Wilson denied us another Roosevelt administration, and, even worse, denied us 4 more years of Bill. But what if that changed? What if, in an alternate timeline, it was, no, not Roosevelt, Bill's time to shine?
Now before going any further, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Established Titles, not merely for making today's video possible, but also for providing yours truly with the official title of Lord of about 1 square foot of land in Scotland. See, there's an old Scottish custom in which landowners are bestowed with the titles of Lord or Lady. What Established Titles offers is the ability to purchase an at least 1 square foot souvenir plot of land in Scotland and make that title yours. You can use it in place of prefixes like Mr. or Mrs. on any documentation that allows for it, like credit cards or plane tickets. But most importantly, you can hang one of these beautifully framed certificates up on your office wall and proudly change your nameplate from Mr. So-and-so to Lord So-and-so. Plus, you'll also receive a unique plot number allowing you to look up the location of your plot. Every order is matched with the planting of a tree to help reforestation efforts and preserve the natural beauty of landscapes both in Scotland and abroad, with the help of the One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future charities. Right now, Established Titles is offering a full 10% off every order when you go to establishedtitles.com/monsieur and use promo code Monsieur at checkout. These frames are delightful gifts for family and friends, old and young alike, so if you're thinking of a last-minute gift to pick up, hey, why not try this one? Once again, that's establishedtitles.com/monsieur and promo code Monsieur at checkout for a full 10% off. Links will be in the description. Now, back to the video. It was during this election that Theodore Roosevelt, on his way to deliver a speech, was shot in the chest by a crazed would-be assassin. However, thanks to the thickness of the speech he'd been carrying in his jacket pocket, the bullet stopped short of hitting any organs and remained lodged in his chest while he proceeded to deliver the speech without medical attention. In this alternate timeline, Roosevelt is shot, survives, delivers his 90-minute speech, and proceeds to die immediately following due to blood loss. Without an iconic and charismatic leader, the Progressive Party fizzles into an essential non-factor, never causing the massive split in the Republican vote which had occurred in our timeline, leaving Taft to secure a cozy victory over Democratic candidate Woodrow Wilson. Wilson had spent the majority of the election targeting Roosevelt for attacks and not Taft, who he saw as a lesser threat. But now with only weeks until election day, Taft suddenly became the most likely victor in the election, and though he did not wage very much of a campaign, as he felt the election was automatically lost on account of Roosevelt splitting the vote, his position as incumbent would prove more than enough to keep the long-standing Republican Party in power. So, Bill stays in office. Does much really change? Well, Bill's second term would see a continuation of his progressive conservatism, as he called it, which pursued economic fair play, law and order, deference to Congress, and the use of economic might in place of military might to achieve America's overseas goals. Strong rule of law would be maintained through continued appointment of judges and the strengthening of the judicial branch, which Taft believed to be the most important of the three branches. As was the case during his first term, he would place a greater emphasis upon foreign relations with Latin America and Asia as untapped centers of trade which the US could easily dominate. Shipping between the US and Far East would rise, while in Latin America, dollar diplomacy replaced previously implemented military hard power with economic soft power. Though of course this wouldn't quite pan out, leading to continued military interventions. On the note of Latin America, a continuation of the Taft administration would see the survival of the pro-US Huerta Diaz regime, which Taft ambassadors worked to prop up. In our timeline, Generals Victoriano Huerta and Felix Diaz overthrew the democratically elected president who had ended the long reign of dictator Porfirio Diaz. However, Taft's presidency had ended at a crucial point for Huerta when his regime was in need of American recognition and support to solidify its legitimacy. Of course, Taft had left office, and the now-serving President Woodrow Wilson refused to support a regime which had ousted a democratically elected leader. An arms embargo was imposed upon Huerta's forces, European countries were warned not to support Huerta, and anti-government revolutionaries were armed, ultimately leading to a continuation of the conflict within Mexico and a failure to establish a stable regime. In this alternate timeline, however, that's not the case, and Huerta continues to receive support from Taft, allowing for the building of positive relations between the US and Mexico in the years following, preventing the perception among Americans during the Great War that Mexico might align itself with Germany, making the Zimmermann telegram an essential non-factor this time around. Conservation efforts would have slowed down and perhaps not seen the restructuring provided by Wilson to create the National Park Service. Legal challenges against malpractice by big business would continue, but otherwise the government would work to ensure political outcomes that made national businesses stronger. Protectionism would be maintained and refined to benefit certain American industries, while, like Wilson, Taft would oversee the creation of an income tax to reduce reliance on tariffs and thus reduce prices domestically. This would be a natural direction to go, as Taft's first term had seen the passing of an amendment making the enacting of such a tax constitutional. Really, quite a bit that Wilson had accomplished in our timeline would be repeated by Taft in this alternate timeline on account of them drawing from the same ideology of progressivism. What really set Taft apart was again his moderation. He wasn't an idealist like Wilson or assertive like Roosevelt. True to their caricatures, if Roosevelt was a cowboy who took politics by the reins and steered in whatever direction he wished, then Taft was the legal scholar who always insisted on doing everything by the book. In his eyes, the presidency was a limited office and he was happy to operate within those limits, and in fact it allowed him to focus on the specificities of the office. Of course, this wasn't just because Taft was meek or timid either. We saw in our timeline that Taft was perfectly capable of taking a more aggressive stance in politics during his time as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but that was because he believed that position to actually hold such power. Bill's second term would be a lot like his first, and as far as policy, would parallel some of Wilson's achievements during his first term. Taft was definitely an efficient executive, once again doubling the number of legal suits brought against corporations that Roosevelt had. Bill just wasn't a very captivating figure, and so when we think of the achievements of progressive presidents, it becomes easy for Taft to be overshadowed by Roosevelt and Wilson, when in fact he did achieve very much during his time. What might make Taft all the more memorable in this alternate timeline, however, is the likelihood that he would be the one to enter the United States into the Great War. In line with his strict views on abiding by the law as written, Taft had observed by 1915 what he believed to have been multiple violations of international law by Germany at the expense of the US. The sinking of the Lusitania and the loss of the some 100 American citizens on board would probably be the last straw for Taft and see a declaration of war upon Germany 2 years earlier than in our timeline, ultimately bringing the war to an early close by throwing the weight of America's industry and might on the side of the Entente. An earlier American entry might just net the US a louder voice at the negotiating table as well, giving Bill, his successor, or one of his ambassadors the opportunity to negotiate a more moderate peace agreement that leaves Germany less destitute and desperate, and thus less likely to lash out in the near future. The US would also be in a better position to promote and join the League of Nations or some other multinational union for the sake of arbitration, something which Taft had been personally supportive of and which he attempted to promote while out of office. In the end, a continuation of the pragmatic Taft administration would see the US not blinded by idealism or Warhawkism, allowing it to take a wiser approach to interventions in both Mexico and Europe, drawing a clear line as to where the US stood and extracting outcomes which benefited the country. The US of Z thanks for watching. Support your legion by liking the video, or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z, out.